Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the plastic stick on the bathroom counter. 2 pink lines, clear as day. Her heart raced, and she felt the blood drain from her face. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when everything in her life was finally falling into place. At 18, Sarah had just graduated high school and was looking forward to starting college in the fall. She and her boyfriend, Jake, had been together for 2 years, and their relationship was stronger than ever. They had plans, dreams, a future mapped out together. But now, those 2 pink lines threatened to derail everything. Sarah sank to the cold tile floor, her back against the bathtub. She hugged her knees to her chest, trying to steady her breathing. Memories of that night 6 weeks ago came flooding back, the night she'd rather forget. It was at Melissa's graduation party. Jake couldn't make it. He was out of town visiting his grandparents. Sarah had gone alone, promising to be the designated driver for her friends. But as the night wore on and the drinks flowed freely, peer pressure got the better of her. One drink turned into several, and before she knew it, she was stumbling upstairs with Melissa's older brother, Tyler. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a pounding headache and a sickening realization of what had happened. She'd sworn to herself it would never happen again, that Jake would never know. She'd pushed the memory down, buried it deep, hoping it would fade away like a bad dream. But now, the consequences of that night were staring her in the face. A soft knock on the bathroom door made Sarah jump. "Sarah, honey, are you okay in there?" Her mother's concerned voice came through the door. Sarah quickly shoved the pregnancy test into her pocket and splashed some water on her face. "Yeah, Mom, I'm fine. Just not feeling great. Must have been something I ate." She opened the door to find her mother's worried face. "You look pale, sweetie. Why don't you lie down for a bit? I'll bring you some ginger ale." Sarah nodded, forcing a weak smile. "Thanks, Mom." As she lay in bed sipping ginger ale, Sarah's mind raced. What was she going to do? How could she tell Jake? Would he stand by her, even though they were so young? And what about college? Her phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Hey, beautiful. How's your day going? Can't wait to see you tonight. Love you." Sarah's eyes welled up with tears. Jake was so good, so kind. He didn't deserve this. But she couldn't hide it from him. She had to tell him the truth. Well, part of it, at least. With shaking fingers, she typed out a reply. "Jake, can you come over now? We need to talk. It's important." The response came almost immediately. "On my way. Everything okay?" Sarah set her phone down without replying. How could she answer that? Nothing was okay. Nothing would ever be okay again. As she waited for Jake to arrive, Sarah's mind wandered to her parents. They had always been supportive. But how would they react to this news? Would they be disappointed? Angry? Would they force her to keep the baby? The sound of Jake's car pulling into the driveway snapped Sarah back to reality. This was it. The moment that would change everything. She heard the front door open, her mother greeting Jake, and then his footsteps bounding up the stairs. When he appeared in her doorway, his face etched with concern, Sarah felt her resolve crumbling. "Sarah, what's wrong? Are you sick?" Jake rushed to her side, taking her hand in his. Sarah looked into his eyes, those kind, loving eyes, and took a deep breath. "Jake, I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and suffocating. Sarah watched as confusion, shock, and then fear flickered across Jake's face. "You're what? How? I mean, we've always been careful," Jake stammered, his grip on her hand tightening. Sarah swallowed hard, the lie bitter on her tongue. "I don't know. Sometimes these things just happen, I guess." Jake fell silent, his gaze dropping to their intertwined hands. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she waited for his response. Would he run? Would he stay? After what felt like an eternity, Jake looked up, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay, we'll figure this out. Together." Relief washed over Sarah, quickly followed by a wave of guilt. Jake was willing to stand by her, to face this challenge head on, and he didn't even know the whole truth. As Jake pulled her into a tight embrace, Sarah buried her face in his shoulder, inhaling his familiar scent. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with tough decisions and hard conversations. But for now, in this moment, she allowed herself to feel safe in Jake's arms. Little did either of them know that this was just the beginning of a journey that would test their love, their families, and everything they thought they knew about themselves and each other. The Johnsons' living room had never felt so small. Sarah sat on the couch, sandwiched between Jake and her mother, while her father paced back and forth, his face a mask of disbelief and barely contained anger. The air was thick with tension, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. I just can't believe this, Mr. Johnson said, running a hand through his graying hair. How could you two be so irresponsible? Sarah's mother squeezed her hand. David, please. Yelling isn't going to change anything. Well, what do you suggest, Linda? That we throw them a party? Mr. Johnson's voice dripped with sarcasm. Jake cleared his throat, sitting up straighter. Mr. Johnson, sir, I know this isn't ideal, but I want you to know that I'm committed to Sarah and our baby. His voice trembled slightly on the last word. Sarah felt a pang of guilt. Jake was trying so hard to do the right thing, and he didn't even know the full truth. Mr. Johnson stopped pacing and fixed Jake with a hard stare. And how exactly do you plan to support a family, Jake? You're both supposed to start college in the fall. I'll get a job, Jake stammered. I'll work full-time if I have to, maybe take classes part-time. And what about Sarah's education? Mrs. Johnson interjected. We've been saving for years to send her to college. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Her mother pulled her into a hug. Oh, sweetie, we're not angry at you. We're just surprised and worried. Mr. Johnson sighed heavily, sinking into his armchair. Okay, let's think about this rationally. Sarah, how far along are you? About 6 weeks, Sarah replied, her voice barely audible. Her father nodded, his expression softening slightly. All right, that gives us some time to figure things out. Jake, I think it's time we had a conversation with your parents. Jake's face paled. My parents? Oh God, they're going to kill me. They need to know, Mrs. Johnson said gently. We're all in this together now. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Sarah's stomach dropped. Jake's parents were here. The next hour was a blur of shocked expressions, tears, and heated discussions. Jake's mother, a petite woman named Karen, alternated between sobbing and lecturing her son on responsibility. His father, Mark, sat in stony silence, his disappointment palpable. Well, Mark finally said, his voice gruff, I suppose the question now is, what are you two planning to do? All eyes turned to Sarah and Jake. Sarah felt her throat constrict. This was the moment she'd been dreading. Jake began, then looked at Sarah. We want to keep the baby. A collective gasp filled the room. Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. They hadn't discussed this. Jake, she whispered, are you sure? He nodded, squeezing her hand. I know it'll be hard, but it's our responsibility. We can do this together. Fresh tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. Jake's unwavering support only made her feel worse about her deception. Now hold on, Mr. Johnson interjected. That's a big decision. Have you two really thought this through? David's right, Karen added. You're both so young. There are other options to consider. The room erupted into a cacophony of voices, everyone talking over each other. Adoption, abortion, dropping out of school. Every possibility was thrown out and debated. Sarah felt overwhelmed, her head spinning. Stop! She suddenly shouted, silencing the room. All eyes turned to her in shock. Just stop, please. This is our decision, Jake's and mine. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. We need time to think about this, to really consider all our options. Can we have some time? The adults exchanged glances, then slowly nodded. Of course, sweetheart, Mrs. Johnson said softly. Oh, this is a big decision. Take all the time you need. As the tense gathering broke up, Sarah felt a mix of relief and dread. She'd bought herself some time, but she knew the hardest conversation was yet to come. She had to tell Jake the truth. Later that night, as they sat on the porch swing, the warm summer air heavy around them, Sarah gathered her courage. Jake, she began, her voice shaking. Oh, there's something I need to tell you. Something important. Jake turned to her, his eyes full of love and concern. What is it, Sarah? You know you can tell me anything. Sarah took a deep breath, her heart pounding. This was it. The moment that could change everything. Jake, the baby, it's not yours. Jake's face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions in the seconds following Sarah's confession. Confusion, disbelief, hurt, and anger flashed across his features in rapid succession. The porch swing creaked as he abruptly stood up, taking a few steps away from Sarah. What do you mean it's not mine? His voice was low, controlled. but Sarah could hear the tremor of barely suppressed emotion. Sarah hugged herself, feeling suddenly cold despite the warm night air. I'm so sorry, Jake. It happened at Melissa's graduation party. I was drunk, and I made a terrible mistake. Jake's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Who? He demanded. Sarah hesitated, then whispered, Tyler, Melissa's brother. Jake let out a bitter laugh. Tyler, are you kidding me? That guy's a total jerk. I know, Sarah said, her voice small. It was stupid. I regretted it immediately. I never meant for any of this to happen. Jake turned to face her, his eyes blazing with hurt and betrayal. Oh, is out. So you've been lying to me this whole time? Letting me think it was my baby? Letting me tell our parents I'd step up and be responsible? Tears streamed down Sarah's face. I was scared, Jake. I didn't know what to do. I thought if I told you the truth, you'd leave me. Leave you? Jake's voice rose. Sarah, I love you. I would have been there for you no matter what. But this is. He trailed off, shaking his head. A tense silence fell between them. Sarah could hear crickets chirping in the distance, the sound jarringly peaceful compared to the turmoil she felt inside. Finally, Jake spoke again, his voice quieter now. Does Tyler know? Sarah shook her head. No, you're the only one I've told. Jake ran a hand through his hair, his expression conflicted. Sarah, I need some time to process this. I can't be here right now. As he started to walk away, Sarah jumped up, reaching for him. Jake, please, I'm so sorry. I love you. We can figure this out together, can't we? Jake paused, his back to her. For a moment, Sarah thought he might turn around, might take her in his arms and tell her everything would be okay. But then he shook his head. I don't know, Sarah. I don't know. With that, he walked to his car and drove away, leaving Sarah alone on the porch, her world crumbling around her. The next few days passed in a blur for Sarah. She barely ate, hardly slept, and jumped every time her phone buzzed, hoping it would be Jake. But he remained silent. Her parents, sensing something was wrong but not knowing the full story, tried to comfort her. They assumed she and Jake were just struggling with the weight of their decision about the baby. On the fourth day after her confession, Sarah's phone finally lit up with a text from Jake. We need to talk. Meet me at the park in an hour. Sarah's heart raced as she made her way to the small park, where she and Jake had spent countless afternoons together. She found him sitting on a bench near the duck pond, his expression unreadable. Hi, she said softly, sitting down beside him. Jake nodded in acknowledgement, but didn't meet her eyes. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he began. About us, about the baby, about everything. Sarah held her breath, waiting for him to continue. I'm hurt, Sarah, really hurt. You betrayed my trust, and that's not something I can just get over overnight. Sarah nodded, fresh tears welling in her eyes. I understand, Jake sighed. But I also know that I love you, and I know that everyone makes mistakes. What happened with Tyler? It doesn't erase our 2 years together, or all the plans we made. A tiny flicker of hope ignited in Sarah's chest. Well, what are you saying, Jake? He finally turned to look at her, his eyes filled with a mix of pain and determination. I'm saying that I want to try to work through this. It won't be easy, and I can't promise anything, but I want to try. Sarah let out a sob of relief, reaching for Jake's hand. To her surprise, he let her take it. There's more, Jake continued. I've been thinking about the baby too, and I think I still want to be there for you. For both of you. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. Jake, you can't. This isn't your responsibility. Maybe not biologically, Jake said, but I made a promise to stand by you, to face this together. I want to keep that promise, if you'll let me. Sarah was overwhelmed by Jake's words, by his capacity for forgiveness and love. Are you sure? This is a huge decision, Jake. I can't ask you to do this. Jake squeezed her hand. You're not asking. I'm offering. It won't be easy, and we have a lot to figure out, but if you want me, I'm here. Sass. Sarah threw her arms around Jake, holding him tight. I love you so much, she whispered. I promise I'll never hurt you like this again. As they sat there by the pond, holding each other, Sarah knew they still had a long, difficult road ahead. They would have to navigate the challenges of young parenthood, rebuild trust in their relationship, and eventually face the truth with their families. But for now, in this moment, Sarah allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. With Jake by her side, maybe, just maybe, they could make it through this together. The weeks following Jake and Sarah's conversation in the park were a whirlwind of doctor's appointments, hushed discussions, and sleepless nights. As Sarah's first trimester progressed, the reality of their situation became increasingly apparent. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Sarah and Jake sat at their favorite booth in the local diner, a place that had been the site of countless dates and important conversations throughout their relationship. Now it served as neutral ground for another crucial discussion. So, Jake said, stirring his coffee absently, we need to make some decisions. Sarah nodded, her hand unconsciously moving to her still flat stomach. I know, we can't keep putting this off. Jake took a deep breath. I've been thinking a lot about what you told me about the baby, about Tyler. He paused, his jaw tightening slightly at the name. And I think we need to tell him. Sarah's eyes widened. Tell Tyler? But Jake, are you sure? What if he wants to be involved? Jake shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant despite the tension in his shoulders. Then we'll deal with that. But he has a right to know, Sarah. And honestly, I think it might be better for all of us in the long run. Sarah considered this. She had been so focused on her relationship with Jake and the impending challenges of parenthood that she had barely spared a thought for Tyler's potential role in all of this. You're right, she said finally. We should tell him, but Jake, no matter what Tyler decides, I want you to know that you're the one I want to be with. You're the one I want to raise this baby with, if that's still what you want. Jake reached across the table, taking her hand in his. It is. I meant what I said in the park, Sarah. I'm in this with you, all the way. Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes. I don't deserve you, Jake. Hey, he said softly, squeezing her hand. We've both made mistakes, but we're going to get through this together, okay? Sarah nodded, wiping away a stray tear. Okay, so we tell Tyler, and then what? Jake leaned back, his expression turning serious. Then we need to tell our parents the whole truth. They deserve to know what they're getting into if they're going to support us. Sarah's stomach churned at the thought of facing their parents again, this time with the full story. But she knew Jake was right. They couldn't build their future on a foundation of lies. You're right, she said. It's going to be hard, but we have to do it. Jake nodded. And after that, well, we need to figure out our plans for the fall. College, work, living arrangements, everything. The enormity of their situation hit Sarah anew. They were about to upend their entire lives, all their carefully laid plans. I'm scared, Jake, she admitted in a small voice. Jake's expression softened. Me too, but we're in this together, remember? Well, what? As they left the diner hand in hand, Sarah felt a mix of fear and determination. The road ahead would be difficult, but with Jake by her side, she felt stronger than she had in weeks. The next day, Sarah found herself standing on the front porch of Tyler's house, her heart pounding. Jake stood beside her, a steady presence despite the tension radiating from him. When Tyler opened the door, his cocky grin faltered at the sight of them. Hey guys, what's up? We need to talk, Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. Can we come in? Tyler's confusion was evident, but he stepped aside, letting them enter. In Tyler's living room, Sarah took a deep breath and launched into the story. She watched as Tyler's expression shifted from confusion to shock to disbelief. You're pregnant? Tyler stammered. And it's mine? Sarah nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Tyler sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. Oh my God, oh my God. Jake, who had been silent until now, spoke up. We thought you had a right to know. We're not asking anything of you, but if you want to be involved. Tyler looked up, his eyes wild. Involved? I'm not ready to be a father. I'm supposed to start college in the fall. I can't do this. Sarah felt a mix of relief and sadness at Tyler's reaction. We understand. We just wanted you to know. As they left Tyler's house, Sarah felt as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. One hurdle down, several more to go. You okay? Jake asked as they walked to his car. Sarah nodded. Yeah, I think so. Thank you for being there with me. Jake pulled her into a hug. Always. That evening, as they sat in the Johnsons' living room once again, this time with both sets of parents present, Sarah felt Jake's reassuring presence beside her. She took a deep breath and began to speak. There's something we need to tell you all. The whole truth about the baby. As Sarah's words filled the room, she watched the shock, disappointment, and concern play across their parents' faces. But beneath it all, she saw something else: love. Unconditional, unwavering love. And in that moment, surrounded by the people who cared for her most, Sarah realized that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as a family. The weeks following the revelations to Tyler and their parents were a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments. The initial shock and disappointment from their families gradually gave way to a tentative acceptance and a determination to support Sarah and Jake through this challenging time. Sarah's parents, after processing the full truth, rallied around their daughter. Her mother, Linda, became a pillar of support, accompanying Sarah to doctor's appointments and helping research everything from prenatal vitamins to childcare options. Her father, David, though still struggling with the situation, focused his energy on practical matters, creating spreadsheets to budget for the baby's expenses and researching health insurance options. Jake's parents had a harder time coming to terms with the situation. His mother, Karen, oscillated between concern for her son's future and a growing excitement about becoming a grandmother. His father, Mark, remained distant, his disappointment evident in his silence and absence from family discussions. One evening, about a month after their confession, Jake found himself alone with his father in their garage. Mark was tinkering with his old Chevy, a hobby he often turned to when stressed. "Dad," Jake said, breaking the tense silence, "I know you're disappointed in me." Mark sighed, putting down his wrench. "I'm not disappointed in you, son. I'm worried. This is a huge responsibility you're taking on, a responsibility that isn't even yours to bear." Jake nodded, understanding his father's concern. "I know it's not my biological child, Dad, but I love Sarah, and I want to be there for her and the baby. It's my choice." Mark looked at his son, really looked at him, for what felt like the first time in weeks. He saw determination in Jake's eyes, a maturity that hadn't been there before. "You're a better man than I was at your age, Jake. I hope you know what you're doing, but I'm proud of you for stepping up." Jake felt a lump form in his throat at his father's words. "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." As Mark pulled his son into a rare hug, Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders. His family was coming around, slowly but surely. Meanwhile, Sarah was facing challenges of her own. Morning sickness hit her hard, making it difficult to keep up with her summer job at the local library. Her boss, understanding the situation, allowed her to take frequent breaks and adjusted her schedule to accommodate doctor's appointments. One particularly rough morning, as Sarah knelt on the bathroom floor, exhausted from another bout of nausea, she felt a moment of despair. How was she going to manage college and a baby when she could barely make it through a work shift? A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Sarah, can I come in?" It was Jake. "Yeah," she called weakly. Jake entered, kneeling beside her and gently rubbing her back. "Rough morning?" Sarah nodded, leaning into his touch. "Jake, how are we going to do this? College, a baby. It feels impossible." Jake was quiet for a moment, considering. Maybe we need to rethink our plans a bit. Have you thought about taking a gap year?" Sarah looked up at him, surprised. They hadn't discussed changing their college plans yet. "A gap year? But what about you?" Jake shrugged. "Maybe I'll take one too. We could both work, save up some money. Then when the baby's a bit older, we can start college together." As Sarah pondered this idea, she felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't the future they had originally planned, but it was a future they could face together. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and Jake threw themselves into planning. They met with academic advisors at their chosen college, discussing options for deferring their admission. They researched part-time job opportunities that would allow them to save money while preparing for the baby's arrival. Their parents, seeing their determination and maturity in handling the situation, became increasingly supportive. The Johnsons offered to let Sarah and Jake live with them after the baby was born to help with childcare and expenses. Jake's parents, coming around to the idea of becoming grandparents, started setting aside money to help with the baby's needs. As Sarah's belly began to swell, the reality of their situation became increasingly apparent. They attended childbirth classes together, painted a nursery in the Johnsons' spare room, and pored over baby name books late into the night. One evening, as they sat on the porch swing where Sarah had first confessed the truth to Jake, she turned to him, her eyes filled with a mix of love and concern. "Jake," she said softly, Are you sure about all this? About us? About the baby? It's not too late to change your mind. Jake took her hand, his gaze steady and sure. Sarah, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. This isn't the path we planned, but it's our path now. You, me, and this baby, we're a family, and we're going to make it work. As Sarah leaned into Jake's embrace, feeling the baby kick beneath her hand, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with sleepless nights, financial struggles, and the balancing act of young parenthood. But with Jake by her side and the support of their families behind them, Sarah felt ready to face whatever the future might bring. Their journey was just beginning, but they were in it together, every step of the way. The autumn leaves were just beginning to turn when Sarah went into labor. It was a crisp September morning, nearly 2 weeks before her due date. Jake had been staying at the Johnsons' house to be close by, sleeping on an air mattress in the soon-to-be nursery. Sarah's water broke in the early hours of the morning, and the house erupted into a flurry of activity. Jake, bleary-eyed but alert, helped Sarah to the car while her parents gathered the hastily packed hospital bag and made necessary phone calls. The drive to the hospital was tense, filled with Sarah's increasingly frequent contractions and Jake's nervous attempts at comfort. By the time they arrived, Sarah was fully in the throes of labor. Hours passed in a blur of pain, encouragement, and anticipation. Jake never left Sarah's side, holding her hand through each contraction, wiping her brow, and offering words of support. Sarah's parents and Jake's mother took turns in the waiting room, all other disagreements forgotten in the face of this monumental event. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a tiny cry filled the delivery room. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, placing the squirming, red-faced newborn on Sarah's chest. Sarah looked down at her daughter, overwhelmed by a rush of love so intense it took her breath away. "She's perfect," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Jake leaned in, his own eyes glistening. "She's beautiful, just like her mother," he said softly, placing a gentle kiss on Sarah's forehead. As the nurse took the baby to be cleaned and measured, Jake and Sarah shared a look of wonder and determination. This was it. They were parents now. Everything was about to change. They named her Lily, Lily Grace Johnson. The first few weeks at home were a whirlwind of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and adjusting to their new reality. Sarah's mother was a godsend, helping with everything from laundry to midnight feedings. Jake's parents, even his initially reluctant father, found themselves enchanted by their granddaughter, visiting often and offering support. One night, as Sarah sat in the rocking chair, nursing Lily in the soft glow of a nightlight, Jake knelt beside them. "I've been thinking," he said quietly, careful not to disturb the feeding baby. "Maybe we should consider getting married." Sarah looked at him surprised. "Jake, you don't have to do that. We're doing okay as we are." Jake shook his head. "I'm not asking because I feel like I have to. I'm asking because I want to. I love you, Sarah, and I love Lily. We're a family now, in every way that matters. I want to make it official." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Are you sure? This isn't how you imagined your life would be at 19. Jake smiled, gently stroking Lily's tiny foot. "No, it's not. It's better. So, what do you say? Will you marry me?" Sarah leaned forward, careful not to disturb Lily, and kissed Jake softly. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, I'll marry you." They were married in a small ceremony in the Johnsons' backyard the following spring. Lily, now 7 months old, was the star of the show, gurgling happily in her frilly dress as she was passed from guest to guest. As Jake and Sarah exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through whatever life might bring, they both felt a sense of rightness. This wasn't the path they had planned, but it was theirs, and they were walking it together. The years that followed were filled with challenges and triumphs. Jake and Sarah both started taking online classes, determined to continue their education while raising Lily. They moved into a small apartment of their own, juggling work, school, and parenthood with the help of their families. There were difficult moments, times when the stress of their responsibilities felt overwhelming, when they argued over finances or childcare or the division of household chores. But there were also moments of pure joy. Lily's first steps, her first words, the proud smile on Jake's face when he made the dean's list despite working full-time and being a dad. As Lily grew, so did their love for each other and for the life they had built together. They faced each new challenge as a team, their bond strengthened by the obstacles they had overcome. On Lily's 5th birthday, as they watched her blow out the candles on her cake, surrounded by family and friends, Jake squeezed Sarah's hand. "We did it," he said softly. "Look at her. Look at us." Sarah leaned into him, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. "We did," she agreed. "It wasn't easy, but we did it together." As Lily ran to them, her face alight with joy, Sarah scooped her up into a hug. Jake wrapped his arms around them both, and in that moment Sarah knew that every struggle, every sacrifice had been worth it. This was their family. Unconventional, unexpected, but filled with more love than she had ever thought possible. And as she looked at Jake over their daughter's head, she saw in his eyes the same certainty she felt in her heart. They had faced the unexpected, made difficult choices, and come out stronger. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. Jake, Sarah, and Lily, a family forged by love, strengthened by adversity, and bound by a choice to stand by each other, no matter what. 10 years had passed since that fateful day when Sarah discovered she was pregnant. Lily, now a vibrant and curious 10-year-old, bounded into the kitchen where Sarah was preparing breakfast. "Mom, is Dad coming to my science fair tonight?" Lily asked, her eyes bright with excitement. Sarah smiled, ruffling her daughter's hair. "Of course he is, sweetie. He wouldn't miss it for the world." Jake, who had just entered the kitchen adjusting his tie, chimed in. "You bet I'll be there. I can't wait to see your project on renewable energy." Lily beamed, hugging her father tightly before grabbing her backpack. "Thanks, Dad. See you both tonight." As the door closed behind Lily, Jake pulled Sarah into a warm embrace. "Can you believe it's been 10 years?" he murmured into her hair. Sarah leaned into him, marveling at how far they'd come. After years of hard work, both had completed their degrees. Jake was now a successful software engineer, while Sarah had found her calling as a social worker, helping young parents navigate challenges similar to those they had faced. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," Sarah replied, "and sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago." Jake nodded, understanding perfectly. "You know, I've been thinking, maybe it's time we told Lily the truth about everything." Sarah tensed slightly. They had discussed this before, agreeing that they would tell Lily about her biological father when she was old enough to understand. "Are you sure she's ready?" Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know if there's ever a perfect time, but she's smart, Sarah. She's starting to ask questions about family genetics in school. I think she deserves to know." Sarah nodded slowly. "You're right. We'll tell her together after her science fair." That evening, after Lily's project on solar energy had won first prize and the excitement had died down, the family sat together in their living room. Lily, still buzzing from her victory, noticed the serious looks on her parents' faces. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her smile fading slightly. Sarah took a deep breath. "Lily, sweetheart, there's something important we need to talk to you about. It's about your father, your biological father." Confusion clouded Lily's features. "What do you mean? Dad's my father." Jake leaned forward, taking Lily's hand. "I am your father, Lily, in every way that matters, but there's something you need to know about where you came from." Over the next hour, Sarah and Jake gently explained the circumstances of Lily's conception and birth. They answered her questions honestly, emphasizing their love for her and for each other. Lily listened quietly, her young mind working to process this new information. When they finished, she was silent for a long moment. "So, you are not my real dad?" she finally asked Jake, her voice small. Jake's heart clenched, but he kept his voice steady. "Lily, I may not be your biological father, but I am your real dad. I've loved you since before you were born, and I'll love you for the rest of my life. Nothing will ever change that." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes as she threw herself into Jake's arms. "I love you, Dad," she sobbed. Sarah joined the embrace, enveloping her family in her arms. "We love you so much, Lily. You're the best thing that ever happened to us." As they sat there, holding each other, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. The fear and uncertainty of her pregnancy, the difficult decisions they had faced, the challenges of young parenthood, all of it had led to this moment, to this family bound by love and choice rather than just biology. In the days and weeks that followed, Lily had more questions. She wondered about Tyler, curious about the man who had contributed to her existence, but played no role in her life. Sarah and Jake answered honestly, always emphasizing that Jake was her father in every way that mattered. One afternoon, as they walked home from school, Lily looked up at Sarah. Mom, do you ever regret what happened? You know, with Tyler. Sarah considered the question carefully. I regret the circumstances, Lily. I regret hurting your dad and disappointing our families. But I could never regret you. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. To us. Lily nodded, processing this. And Dad? Does he regret staying? Sarah's heart swelled with love for Jake. You'd have to ask him, sweetie, but I don't think he does. Your dad chose us, chose this family. That's a powerful kind of love. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Lily suddenly spoke up. I've been thinking about everything you told me. Sarah and Jake exchanged a glance, waiting for her to continue. I think, Lily said slowly, that I'm really lucky. Some kids only have one person who loves them, like a parent. I have three, Mom, Dad, and the man who helped create me, but loved me enough to let me have a better life than he could give me. Tears sprang to Sarah's eyes as Jake reached across the table to squeeze Lily's hand. You're right, sweetheart, he said. We're all very lucky. As Sarah looked at her family, at the husband who had chosen to love her and Lily unconditionally, and the daughter who had brought so much joy into their lives, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. Their path hadn't been easy or conventional, but it had led them here, to a life filled with love, understanding, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Whatever challenges the future might hold, Sarah knew they would face them together, just as they always had. In the end, their story wasn't just about unexpected pregnancy or young parenthood. It was a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and the family we choose. And as Sarah looked at Jake and Lily, she knew she wouldn't have it any other way.